My name is Rachel, and I'm a PhD student in the Industrial Organizational Psychology program at Old Dominion University. When I graduate, I would like to work as an internal or external consultant solving organizational problems using the expertise that I have gained here in this program. I like this kind of work because it allows me to help people sort of in an indirect way. I think people often think of psychologists as like helping people, and although industrial organizational psychologists or IOs, we don't sit and consult with people or counsel them in that sort of therapy way. We do help people in that we are able to select people who are going to be a really great fit for the jobs. They'll probably be happier there. Select coworkers that will have the right skills and abilities to help the other people working there support their jobs as well, and also to train people so that they're better prepared to do the work that they're already doing for the organization. So I like that you're kind of helping people in a unique way, not the way that you usually think of with psychology, but still very important. So the reason that I chose IO is sort of a roundabout story. Like most IO psychologists, I don't think many people grow up thinking, I'll be a psychologist, an IO psychologist when I grow up. So all through undergrad, I focused on cognitive psychology. So that's like learning, decision making, those kinds of things. And I really loved the research. I thought research was just like the greatest thing in the world. I loved it very much. But as I was delving deeper into cognitive and really thinking about career paths, one of the things that bothered me was that it seemed like there wasn't a lot of direct application to helping people right now with their lives. It seemed like a lot of the focus was on doing basic research, which is important, but for me personally, I wanted to be able to see a little more application. So I was explaining this problem to a friend and colleague at the time and saying that, I really was looking for something where I could apply my work directly, and she said, you should really check out IO psychology. It sounds like exactly the kind of thing that you're looking for. So I took her advice and I went and visited a faculty member, and she was absolutely right. I love that I still get to do a lot of the things that I did in cognitive. I study training. Training is all about learning. But at the same time, when I'm done with my work at the end of the day, I can say, and this is exactly how an organization should use this right now, or here are some best practices for organizations based on the literature. So I really like that IO allows that direct application. So the kind of courses and learning that I've done in the program I think are kind of common among IO programs. The first thing that I think of with a PhD program is research, and I think no matter what kind of PhD you're doing, you're going to do a lot of research, and ours is definitely no different. My experience is being involved in a lot of different research projects, so I've done obviously my master's thesis. Right now I'm working on my dissertation, but I've done a lot of other different kinds of research projects, which I really appreciate because it's given me a really broad view of the field, and it's also allowed me to have a lot of things to talk about whenever, for example, I interviewed for internships. I had a lot of different experiences to share in the interview, which I think was really helpful. So speaking of internships, the other thing that I think of as really common with IO programs in terms of learning is people do a lot of internships. So for me, I've only done one. I did one over the summer, just this last summer, but some people do more, and I don't think there's generally any pushback to do an internship. They're generally encouraged. It's one of the great ways to get applied experience before you graduate. Sometimes we do some sort of applied projects in our classes, like we did one to develop a performance appraisal system for a police department, which was really cool and really interesting. But I got a lot more applied experience whenever I was able to do my internship, which I really appreciated. Most of the internships are paid, which is always nice as a grad student, but just the quality of experience that you get is just so great, and just like my PhD program, I found that there was a lot of variety in the projects that I got to do over the summer, which I really appreciated. So then, of course, the last component of learning in our program is our coursework, and IO, because it's all about just people and work, you can imagine the breadth of coursework that we take. So we take classes on selecting employees, training employees, appraising their performance. We've also taken classes on leadership and motivation. I took a class on occupational health psychology, and then we take a whole bunch of stats classes as well. So, for example, I took one on psychometrics, so how to develop a test and how to validate it, but also all kinds of different statistical analyses are also included in our programs. One of my favorite things about IO, and one of the things that really drew me to IO, is the variety of career options. So we think of like 3 different career routes for IOs. The first one is going academic. So you need a PhD to go academic generally, but going the academic route, you become a professor, so then you would teach and run research within an organization, which is a great career choice. Then there are two others that we think of as falling under the sort of applied realm. The first is internal consulting, so there you may work for a large organization that needs things like selection systems developed, and leadership training, performance appraisal, and all of that, and you might work with a team of IOs to do that all together. Then there is external consulting, where you work for a consulting firm that's hired by organizations who may not be able to afford to have IOs in-house, or they may have a team of IOs, but they need a little extra help with something, and then you work in a project for them. So not only are all of those careers very different, and you get a lot of choice in terms of where you want to live and the kind of work you want to do, and I think that's really, really great about IO. The other thing that's great is within the work there's a lot of variety. So whenever you run a study start to finish, for example, you really get to see all aspects of the project, and I love that variety in the work. You might also get to do things like client interactions. So some people like to sort of work alone at a computer all day, and some people are more people-oriented. So if you're sort of people-oriented like I am, then you get to interact with clients a little bit, which is really nice. So one of the hardest things to deal with in terms of going into IO is that the training can be kind of lengthy. So like I'm in a PhD program, and a PhD program is usually designed in IO to take about 5 years, but depending on your dissertation, they can definitely go a little bit longer than that. A master's program is a little bit shorter, it's like 2 to 3 years, but I think especially when we're talking about the PhD, but sometimes the master's as well, it's a fair amount of time to have to commit to something, and I think that can be hard to swallow, especially when you're just coming out of undergrad, to think like, oh, I'm going to be in school for another 5+ years. Not that it isn't well worth it, but it's definitely a large amount of time. The other thing that I think of in terms of a challenge in IO training is the more developed IO becomes and the more organizations are moving towards using big data and developing complicated models of prediction for employee performance or even profits, things like that, there's more of a need to have really good statistical skills and knowledge in order to perform well in this field. So even just the short period of time that I've been involved in IO, I've seen a push towards people knowing more advanced statistical techniques, hierarchical linear modeling, structural equation modeling, those kinds of things, which maybe weren't as emphasized before. I've been able to take a lot of those classes, which I feel really grateful for, but they're definitely not easy courses, especially if you don't have a lot of statistical background. It can be a big transition to go into grad school and have to start taking a whole bunch of stats classes. They're rewarding in their own way, but they're definitely not the easiest classes I took. But there are still a few things that I wish that maybe I had known or had maybe been emphasized a little bit more to me to help me get through the process of getting into an IO program and then going through my program in general. One of the things that I wish I'd known is to get as much applied experience as possible. I'm sort of lucky that I fell into a few opportunities through some of the research that I've been doing, some of the classes I've been involved in, and then of course I did an internship to gain some applied experience before I graduate, but I didn't really realize until I was nearing the end and trying to tailor my resume for the kinds of jobs that I'm looking for, how important that applied experience is, because it really gives you job experience before you even graduate. So if you're going through an IO program and you want to do an applied position, internal or external, I would get as much applied experience as possible. Another thing that I wish someone had told me earlier on was to make sure that you're getting as much variety in your research experience as possible. It's kind of easy to become kind of narrowly focused in one area and maybe only work with one faculty member, but the more you work with other people, the more you work on other projects, the more experience you gain, which not only helps develop you as a professional, but it's also one of those things, again, when you go to job interviews or internship interviews, you're able to talk about that variety of experience, and it makes you a lot more flexible to apply for lots of different positions and just makes you a more well-rounded person, I think. Another thing that I wish I had known is that I've only sort of learned about more the more I get into the field, is I knew that there were a variety of career options. I knew there were some applied options, which is kind of what drew me to IO, but I didn't even realize within those groups of academic applied internal and applied external, how much variety there is in those careers as well. So I wish I had known a little bit more about those, because I think I would have explored them a little bit better to maybe better tailor my experiences towards a few select careers or one in particular. I like that I have a lot of variety in terms of experience, but I wish I had known a little bit more, because I feel like every year I'm just amazed by the different careers that I discover are available in IO. So I do have a few pieces of advice that I would give someone who's considering going into grad school for IO psychology, whether at the master's level or the PhD level. My first piece of advice is to take an IO class. If there's one available at your university, definitely take it. If there isn't one available, then I would recommend reading an IO textbook, just cover to cover, really, and you can find a lot of great ones online for very cheap, actually, especially if they're sort of an older edition. They'll still give you a really great overview of the field, and I think one of the great things about reading a textbook is it gives you an idea of what you want to focus on and what you definitely don't want to focus on in grad school. So if you're feeling kind of like you want to do IO, but you're not really sure what kind of research you want to do, reading something like that can really help narrow your focus. And when you apply for grad schools, you want to have a bit of a focus, because you want to just choose the faculty members and the programs that are going to appeal most to you. And I think one of the biggest mistakes people make sometimes applying to graduate programs is not having enough focus. They don't expect you to know what your dissertation is going to be like when you're applying for the program, but at the same time, they do expect you to know generally what you would like to do. Would you like to do selection? Are you more interested in leadership? Those kinds of questions can be answered by doing things like taking a class and or reading a textbook. Another piece of advice I have for anyone considering IO is to really utilize the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology's website, or SIOP, and that's at siop.org. So I use this website a lot whenever I was applying for schools, but I want to stress that this website isn't just for practitioners, it's not just for grad students, it's really for anyone interested in psychology, in IO psychology as well. So they have a few resources to help people learn more about the field if you're considering going to grad school for IO psychology. They also have a really great searchable database of all of the graduate programs available for IO psychology, whether it's for a master's program or a PhD program. They have them all in there, and you can search by location, and there's a few different ways. Otherwise that you can search, you can also compare their GRE scores, the GPA of the people who are accepted into the programs, the kinds of funding they get, where they end up with their jobs. Do they go academic? Do they go applied? And all of those things can really help you make some decisions in terms of which programs you want to apply for and which programs will be a best fit for you. So it can help you really narrow the list down of programs, and then you can investigate the different faculty in the programs to further identify which programs are really going to work for you. So I think that's a great tool. The SIOP site also has really great things like they have data on the salary for different levels of IO psychologists. So if you're kind of wondering, what does an IO psychologist make? SIOP will tell you. If you want to know about the job outlook for IO psychologists, SIOP also keeps track of that. So a lot of great things are available there. My last piece of advice for if you want to go into IO, which is sort of general because I think it's true for all PhD programs, but it's true also for master's students. So you want to get as much research experience as possible before you apply to grad school. One of the things that programs look for, especially PhD programs, but also master's programs, is they want you to have some experience doing research. And you can just volunteer in a lab to do that. You shouldn't be afraid to just email a faculty member and say, I looked at your website and I thought your work looked really interesting. Do you perhaps have some room this semester for me to volunteer to help with some of your work? I'd be happy to help with anything you need. That's kind of the route I took, and it turned out pretty well, I would say. So definitely get as much research experience as possible. I think sometimes people kind of get into one lab and then they stay there, but I would recommend doing a lot of different experiences. So don't just work in one lab. If you can, work in 2 or 3 or maybe even 4. It exposes you to a lot of different faculty members, so you get to learn about their working styles, you get to learn a little bit about what you would want as a grad student, your advisor to be like. It also gives you a lot of different kinds of research experience, so learning how to do different kinds of data collection, different kinds of data cleaning, and learning about the different philosophies that exist within psychology is really great, and you'll use that in your program and beyond. Those experiences really stick with you, I think. So I think all of those are really important. The other thing I would say about getting research experience is getting related research experience is great. So if you want to do IO and you have access to an IO lab and you can do research there, that's excellent. That's the best case scenario. But if you're at a school that doesn't have an IO program and you really want to do IO, don't be afraid of that. Still try to get as much research experience as possible. Most of my research experience was not related to IO, but I still found it very useful, and I still think it really helped me to get into a program.